screams in the night. Indian legends. Miles of footprints. Sightings. What are these elusive hominids that stalk the wilderness? Join us for eyewitness accounts, questions and answers, Bigfoot encounters of the past, and ongoing encounters in the present. Your host, two-time witness, field researcher for 43 years, William Jevning. Welcome to the mystery. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Creek Devil. We have an interesting show this evening. We've got Stephen and Todd is with us with some new information. We're not sure what happened to Brian yet. Must not be home yet, so when he's available we'll bring him on. And Tom's here, of course. Stephen, we're going to hand you the microphone and let you begin, and then Todd will bring you in a little bit afterward, to update us on what's going on with you.
Okay, well, my name is Stephen, and I'm from Florida. I run a traditional archery manufacturing company, have for about 20 years now. So I'm a pretty avid hunter, and my sighting started back in the 90s, and I was not hunting traditionally then. Was mostly using a compound bow. But different things that were happening in the woods, I didn't recognize these things. Now I know what they were, but back then I had no clue. So one particular time, I had parked my truck alongside of this creek, and I walked down just to see if there was anything on this edge line that I could see, and I was gun hunting. And as I hit the creek edge, the wind line was blowing like from my left side into the creek. And as soon as my wind line hit this palmetto patch, and this was a cypress creek, it was really thick, not too deep, but it was, pretty big. It was very wooded. I heard this huge thing running and just busting logs. And it didn't sound like a bear or a hog or a deer or a cat or anything like that. It sounded like, a human type crunching in there, bipedal. And I just kind of like, whoa, what was that, and it just kept running. And it ran probably for 60, 75 yards, and then it stopped. And I was like, I ain't going in there. So I turned around, and I went back to my truck. And I really didn't think a whole lot about it. And I told some guys at camp about it, and they just said, well. So anyway, another time I hunt this swamp, and this is where I had my major sighting. But before that, I used to hunt this swamp alone. And I kept this trail cut with little shears that I would go out in there, and I would just snip my way through. And it was about a quarter mile through a swamp, and there was an oak island on it. And it was probably only about 2 acres in the middle of the swamp. Really scary. I mean, you had to wade through water, about up to over your knees. I had to wear hip boots. And there was gators and snakes and all that stuff, but I wasn't really worried about that. And I would ease out there. I'd always wait till the sun just started creeping up before I started going in there, and never really had any issues. One time I was out in there. I've been out there for, I'm going to say about 2 hours. And all of a sudden I heard this huge crack and smash, like somebody had busted a huge log and thrown it to the ground. So I was like, what the, and I'm looking around. I couldn't see where it came from. Anyway, I stayed there the whole day, and I believe I was gun hunting at the time as well. So, and I'm kind of in a tree stand, and I was camouflaged out, and I stayed there the whole day. I didn't hear anything else. So on the way out, I walked by this big old live oak tree, and there is this massive branch that was kind of, if you know anything about live oaks in the wild, they hang down. A lot of them will just grow low to the ground, the branches. Anyway, this thing was snapped off and just laying right there. And it was a huge branch. I looked at it, didn't have any sign of decay or anything like it. It was broken off. It just decided to break. At least that's what I was thinking at the time, but it still spooked me. So I ended up going out of there, and it was probably just around dark. And, didn't really, just went back to the camp, same old thing. Anyway, in 95, and I don't know quite when this was. This may have been that same year. It might have been the year before. But when I saw these creatures was in 1995 or 96. On Thanksgiving Day, our families were out at Three Lakes, and we were camping and having Thanksgiving out there, having a good old time. And me and my buddy Jim Hill, he's dead now, but him and I decided we're going to go out to the swamp. Now, his wife, Becky, was Indian. She wouldn't go out there. She got spooked every time she went out there. She thought something wasn't right. She never said what it was, and we didn't know anything about these creatures or anything. But she just said, "I'm not going out there. There's something weird about that place." So, and I believe she's Blackfoot Indian. No, Iroquois. Sorry. Anyway, we hunted out there. We were supposed to be back around noon. So I'm going to say we get out of there about, 11 o'clock we left. And we came out of the swamp, had to go through some woods and then to the dirt road. And my truck was parked on the left there, kind of hidden in the palmettos. And I had an old Bronco, and whenever you hit the window on this thing on the back, the electric window, it would screech, just make this loud noise. And it did that. And I put my 270 in there, and Jim was unloading his stuff. I still have my vest on, my orange vest, which is required. And I walk out to the road, and I look down about 200, I'm going to say about 175 yards. There's an oak hammock. It completely covers the road. It's really cool, and it seems like there's always stuff down underneath there. And I just walked to the road, and I'm looking down there, and I see this dude come out on the left, and he's just real tall, red-looking dude, the same color from head to toe, just kind of lanky looking, come out, and he's walking away from me, going down the road, just swinging his arms. He had a very odd gait, and I said, "Jim, look at this guy." He's like, "Huh?" And I said, "This guy, he has no orange on, and he's just walking down the road." So Jim comes out, and he goes, "Man," and I didn't really think a whole lot. I mean, this thing was tall, but it looked like a human. It looked like, it was solid color from head to toe. So I'm thinking, well, maybe it was I don't know what I thought at the time. But just then, and this thing got to the other edge of the road, and there's a huge palmetto patch it was walking toward. Next thing you know, we see this black one come out. And this was shorter. And this was definitely a female because you could see the breasts on it. And it was going to go across the road. It was holding its belly, and its belly was very large. I think it was holding an infant. And it was jet black, and I could see the hair on that thing. And it looked right at us. And as soon as it looked at us, it kind of, like, you could see it just freaked out, and it started running, holding its stomach. And it was having a hard time running. It was the way it ran was funny. Well, my buddy Jim's like, "That's a damn gal. Look at that. That's one of them damn swamp." And I mean, I'm like, whoa, because we didn't believe in any of that. Never would have thought there were swamp apes out there or anything like that. I mean, I've heard rumors and stuff, but, before you see anything like this, it's always, yeah. But I'll tell you what, we just were sitting there in shock. And I said, "Man, we got to get down there," because they went into this thick area. So we get in our truck, and we go down there. We were down there within 2 minutes, a minute, I would say. And we go in there, and I've got a sidearm. Jim had a sidearm. In fact, I think I got my rifle out. And I had, I wasn't going to shoot anything. I just was for my own protection. And by then, I started getting very nervous. And Jim was nervous too. We went in there, we walked in a little bit, and Jim goes, he goes, I got a feeling something looking at me. He goes, I ain't going in no more. And I said, yeah, I have the same feeling. And they were just very, very tall, like 8-foot tall palmettos. You couldn't walk through them. I mean, you could get in them, but you'd have to get on your knees and crawl. And we just got this really spooky feeling. And you couldn't see any tracks because it was during a drought. It was very like pine straw type ground, no tracks or anything. I couldn't smell anything, but I just had this sense of do not go in there. So about, I don't know, maybe 2 minutes later, this guy comes down the road pulling in. He gets out of his car real quick. He goes, what the hell was that? And I said, he goes, what'd you see in the road there? And I said, well, how did you know I just saw? He goes, because I was scoping you down the road. He was down the road about, I don't know, a couple hundred yards from us, looking down the road with his high-powered rifle, which to me, I don't know if that's very smart. But he goes, I'm watching these two things go across the road, and then I see you get, kind of, I saw you there, but you walked in, my view and blocked it. And he goes, that wasn't what I think it was it? I said, dude, I don't know, man. I think these things are swamp apes. He goes, we're paranoid. He goes, I wouldn't doubt it. And he just got in his car and just left. And then some kids came by, and we were telling them, they turned around and left. They wouldn't even go hunting anymore. Because by then we started, something like this, when you first see it, you're like shocked. You're like, well, no, I didn't. You want to talk yourself out of what you just saw, really. And when we went back to camp, I reported it to the check station. The guy looks at me and he goes, he's like, it's kind of early for you to be drinking. And I said, dude, I have not been drinking. And both of us were like white as a ghost, got the big wide eyes, real serious. Well, I said, give me your check card. I'm going to write it down. So I just wrote it down as because you have to see what you observe or if you've shot anything or whatever. And I wrote down what I saw. And the guy looked at me and he shook his head, didn't overreact or, anything like that. He went back to camp and we were acting really weird. I was getting more nervous and more nervous and more nervous because I'm thinking, I've been going out in this swamp for years alone with a bow and arrow, never carried a sidearm. And, now all of a sudden my whole world is like, what in the... So we're trying to tell our wives what happened. Well, my wife, she believed me. If I told her I went to the moon, she'd believe me, because I wouldn't, I'd tell her the truth. But Becky, you guys are pulling my leg, and she wouldn't believe it. And it was just, and finally, she called me up, I don't know, 2 or 3 days later. And she says, I believe you guys. Jim just will not get off of this. And it's really affected him. I said, Beck, we're telling you the truth. We saw what we saw. I said, I don't know what it was. I said, but it wasn't human. And, I've had time to think about this. This has been a lot of years now. And it looked like a caveman. I mean, I've heard this, a lot of people say this. And that's what it looked like to me. It looked like cavemen. They, it didn't look really like monkeys. It looked just kind of like a human that was Neanderthal looking, and it wasn't a threatening experience as far as, we're going to die or anything. Although I was scared, I think it was mostly just shocking. It just shocked us. It's like, what? So anyway, Becky, I think it was that year, more toward November and December, or maybe it was toward the end of gun season. She told me that she was out there, her and Jim were out there hunting in the cattle field, which is right near where we saw these two creatures. And she said she saw something walking through the Black Angus cows and stood up and pushed several of the cows out of the way. And she was serious. Now, I don't know if she was just saying this trying to one-up us or what, whatever. But the point is that she told me that, and she stuck to this story because I have talked to her recently about it, and she still says the same thing. So these things were out there, and it's kind of affected me in a positive way, but in a very negative way as far as I'm paranoid in the woods. I don't feel safe anymore, and going on these podcasts and stuff and listening to them and hearing all these incidents and some of them have been absolutely terrible, scary and life-threatening. And I'm like, whoa. And not only that, it seems like there's more than one species of these things. They've evolved into different creatures. So, I mean, what? I'm thinking, yeah, great. Because I don't even hunt in Florida anymore. I left all my gear on that island. We left 3 stands on that island, and I never went back. So, I went out there with the Bigfoot Research Organization. I think you call them BFRO. The girl went out there with me, and she kind of, we walked around and we found some interesting things, a couple of broken things, and found a spot of blood on a palm leaf, which I thought was weird. But we didn't see anything. And she says, well, they probably won't harm you, and kind of set, because I was a little bit paranoid about going back out there. And other than that, I haven't been out there since. I kind of stayed away from that place, but I still hunt. But now I hunt with a trad bow, which is even worse because I got tinnitus in my ears so bad. In order for me to gun hunt, I have to wear all this apparatus on my head. And I just don't like it. So I'm pretty much a trad bow hunter. I do carry a sidearm wherever I go. And if you see me in the woods, do not scare me because I carry a machete. I'm paranoid. I'm like a little kid in the woods. I can't. When I go in the dark, I mean, I'm paranoid of the dark now. I really am.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean.
I mean, I feel I have a right to be. My friends that I've told this to, most of them laugh, I don't think I've ever met anyone that has seen one other than the guy that was with me and Becky.
That's what I found interesting about your story, Stephen. Is the fact that you and one other guy witnessed this thing, and you had a guy behind you, and I'm with you on that. If you got people in front of you, you don't scope. You just don't. You use blind.
Yeah.
But so he was a total stranger. He didn't know you guys, but he came up and you're saying he asked you guys what it was, so he saw it too.
Yeah. Yep.
That's a real good encounter because now you got 3 people. 3 separate witnesses and then one who doesn't know the other 2. I mean, that's good authentication.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, Todd, feel free to jump in and ask questions.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, I was going to ask Stephen, and I've heard this time and again, and so this is one of the 2 things that I really find fascinating about this topic is you get a feeling not to go in there. And is it a feeling that you've ever had before, or that it's just something you go to that one area?
Well, if I'm going to describe it, and I can't really speak this from experience, but if you've ever been in war before, a lot of my friends are veterans and Vietnam veterans. And when you're being hunted, and you are a hunter, you retain that sense, and I don't know what it is, but you have a sense of awareness, and it's a feeling. I think it comes from your nervous system or something. I don't know, but my buddy, I have a good buddy that's a Vietnam veteran. He's been a hunter his whole life, and he told me, he said, when I was in Vietnam, my whole platoon got wiped out. And he said, I was the only one that survived. And he goes, the only reason why I survived is because I knew something was about to happen and I dodged it.
Yeah.
And
Just
I
like,
ended up surviving, and he said, I killed most of those men that killed our guys. But he said, he goes, I had a gut feeling. And so basically the answer to your question is, yeah, I think it's a gut feeling. Now, whether or not this thing was saying something through telepathical powers, I mean, I don't think so. I didn't really feel that. I just felt
yeah,
that
I've never been comfortable with that aspect, that paranormal aspect, because especially like what you just said, how would it benefit them if they're going to hunt you to send out a warning first? I mean, that just doesn't, it's not logical.
Yeah, I mean, now if I'd have seen those things, knowing what I know now and the amount of experience and I've listened to hundreds of stories about, all these creatures, the mean ones, the ones they call dog man and all this weird stuff, which some of that is really weird, but these guys you listen to their stories. I don't think they're lying. They're like, something happened to them. And some of these guys got very close, and some of them were attacked by them. So if I'd have known that then, oh, I don't know, man. But the point is that, I don't want to fight these things. I don't want to kill one. I just want to go hunting. If I got to go out and say, Mr. Squatch, can I hunt in your woods today? I'll give you half my deer. Whatever. And I know that sounds stupid, but these things, I think they're mad at us because
that's something we'd have to ask Will what the deal. But I think if you offered him half the deer, they'd say, "Great, I'll take that half. I'll take the other half. Hey, looks like you're right there next to it. I think I'll grab you while I'm at it."
Yeah, that's kind of yeah. Well, I think they're mad at us. We've been stealing their food. We've been wrecking their land, cutting their trees, pushing them. My own philosophy on this, for what it's worth, I think these things have been around as long as we have. We've been living. I think this is a missing link here that either has been hidden by the knowledge has been hidden, which I'm sure it has, and has not been passed down to us normal people because of whatever they want us to believe. I don't know. But it seems like these things are breeding like crazy, and they're becoming a lot more of them are around, or all their stuff's getting chopped up and we're seeing more.
Well, it's interesting. It seems like these things have a kind of a dark side to them. It's kind of a dark from a behavior standpoint.
Yes.
You look back in history, and what I find interesting is you get the historical accounts. I mean, we're talking going back to the 1600s when the Spanish were here, and then before then, of course, the Native Americans, the Canadian Indians. You get consistent behavior of these things. So I think it's kind of, it comes with the territory with these things. I don't know.
Yeah.
Will, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, they're definitely have a nasty side to them, short tempers and the lot. In fact, in the next segment, we're going to see a first-hand example of that. But yeah, I mean, it's been the whole history of their behavior, and they do predate humans, I believe. Well, in fact, we know because the natives say they were here when they came to these lands.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I've seen or heard a few people have, I don't even want to say a relationship, but they're feeding these things. They're giving them gifts, and they leave stuff. And this one guy is, I don't know if you all heard this guy. He's got this one on recording, and I think it's in Canada. And this thing is talking. And I'm going to tell you, if they're faking this, it really sounds, the noises that this creature makes, the vocalization. I've been a musician most of my life, and vocally I know it's possible. I know what elks do and moose and bear, but this thing, it screams and roars at the same time. It's just absolutely crazy. So, but the vocalizations these things can make, which I have never heard, physically, but I probably, I don't think I want to hear them.
I got to say the jury's out as far as I'm concerned, but I don't have the experience like yourself. I haven't heard it, and I don't know I haven't really formed an opinion on it. The whole business of feeding them, from my understanding is I don't think I'd want to feed them any more than I'd want to feed a family of grizzly bears.
Yeah, it's a can of worms you're opening up.
Well, yeah, you don't want to, and then if that food supply disappears, they really get ticked off.
Yeah, any hunter, anyone that's involved in hunting and an outdoors person, all know that. You feed animals, they get used to it. Yeah, they'll be your friend. When the food runs out, that's when you run into problems.
And people, they attribute human traits onto these things, traits like gratitude,
yes,
thankfulness, and it doesn't happen in the wild kingdom. It's like, I want more, and they see you as an obstacle, or they just flat have a temper tantrum, and you're going to be on the receiving end of that. You don't want to be. So.
But then you hear these stories of Civil War people. This one I'm thinking particular. This Civil War.
Talking about.
Yeah. Now they were very nice to him. They saved his life, and then they let him go.
Okay, so here's the deal on that. I listened to that story as well, and then I'm not going to mention the source, but I listened.
Yeah, you don't have to.
Yeah, I watched the source because I was fascinated by that story as well. It was a few months ago. Mm-hmm. Then I found out that the guy, and I don't hold it against him. I mean, that's great. He later came out and said, hey, listen, people are getting mad at me because I take one set of circumstances and another set of circumstances, and I hope I get this right. But anyway, basically, he is, I don't want to say fabricating the story, but he's just telling campfire stories, basically. This is stuff that he's making up. He's taking several sets of stories, combining them, and then he's, for interest's sake, he adds Bigfoot into it.
Yeah, so I don't like that.
What I think happened on that Civil War story was I think some people took that guy in for 2 weeks, took care of him, and then, he just, and I don't hold that against him. I just, once I found out that's what he was doing, I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. That's not really a Bigfoot story.
Well, you're probably right. But, I mean, there are stories of these things helping people in situations. I'm not saying it's common, but there has been people that have been maybe something run a grizzly bear off or whatever. They're just about to get ate, or they got this one story where they crashed their car into a ditch. This lady says this female one came and ripped the door off and saved their family from drowning. But that may be fabricated as well. I'd like to think that's true, but it's like putting a smiley face on a grizzly bear,
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, yeah. I can say, because I've heard all that stuff, and it's left me in a state of confusion for the longest time, because you've got diametrically opposed perspectives. On the one hand, you got these things being these beasts that tear things apart and eat people. On the other hand, oh gosh, they come in and they save people, and people trade and talk to them and this sort of thing. And one of the things I really appreciate is this show is just bringing real life encounters.
Yes.
To this, and bringing some I guess sanity or some truth to it. So listen, I'm going to bring in Todd real quick, and Todd, you had a really interesting encounter that sort of mirrored one of mine a while back. Can you, are you okay just bringing us up to speed and kind of giving us a quick summary of that situation? It's very fascinating.
Which was that, Tom?
The one that your original encounter that you had.
Oh, my Audible.
Yeah.
Encounter.
Yeah.
Well, like I already told the story, but nothing's changed.
Right. No. I just thought just for.
I'm sorry, Tom. I'm not thinking straight right now. I got overheated today, so I'm trying to get myself watered down.
Oh, yeah,
So I've
yeah.
just been listening.
You're up in, you're in Northern California.
But yeah, mine was just an audible, experience hunting camping with an older friend and a younger friend, and we just heard, audible thing after dark, that we couldn't explain from all the noises that we already were aware of the forest.
Well, and in addition to that, it wasn't just you guys who detected it, but the dog was with you. And that,
Yes.
to bring everybody up to
Yep.
speed, this is a dog that wasn't afraid
Yeah.
of lions or bears.
Yeah, and the dog never rode my truck again.
Hey,
Yeah.
Todd.
Well, we made the dog ride in the truck once, but he tied him in there, and it was just like the dog was being tortured. So I told him next time, don't tie that dog in there. So, but he'd get in my friend's truck and go hunting after that, that was just kind of one of the things that made me think, what the hell was that? Because I was still thinking, which I've just still never put it down as a subject. I didn't see it, but I just can't explain anything it could have been. But the dog was just kind of the nail in the coffin kind of thing, because they have animals have a sense we don't have, kind of.
Hey, Todd.
Yes.
You and I have been texting about a situation that happened last year during hunting season. You want to talk about that?
Well, there's a couple I texted you a couple weeks ago too. They're complete different places, but the one I was just texting to you today is from another part of Trinity County that I'm still, gonna have to talk to trying to get a hold of these other people that were involved and see, if they elaborate the same thing that my friend told me. So I don't, have all the details yet, and some involve some track pictures, which I haven't got yet. So it was just relayed to me, one story, and it was not an eyewitness, that one, but the one I relayed to you a couple weeks ago was I was at my stepson's homecoming from the military. We had a barbecue. So I'm still just parched. And there's a good friend of mine. He hunts in the same deer zones in California I do, and I haven't talked to him in a year or so. And we were talking about hunting during the barbecue, and ironically, he's hunting in the area, like a 50, 60 mile, square mile, 100 mile, square mile area out there by Heim Palm, Hay Fork area, where I've been hunting the last about 3 years, because I kind of got chased out of my other area by the fires from 15, and it's been overrun by hunters. And we haven't seen each other. We kind of laughed, and we were talking about, well, I went up this area, and I said I was there too, and I was at this other area, and I was there too, and we just can't believe we didn't see each other. But anyways, we were just talking about that area, and it's an area I was previously, I think, telling Will that I've seen beef row out there before in the 90s. I come around a corner with my cousin, and it was a little bit before dark, and they were setting up. They had several vehicles, and they were setting up for some sort of call blasting thing. And we just had to pull over there and see what was going on, and they wouldn't say much, and then they finally told us what they were doing. So I was telling my friend about it at this barbecue, and I guess because I brought it up, he told me, he said, did you hear what happened out there last year? I was in the same area. And I said, no. He said, my son found tracks, my son Kyle. And I said, you did? He said, yeah, he yelled at me. He was walking down this old cut. He was on one side of the ravine, and he started yelling, Dad, there's a big-ass track over here. It's a human foot. It's huge. And he was real ecstatic about it. And he said, well, come over here. Was ravine to get across was kind of the cuts out there are getting really overgrown with brush now. They're from the 80s. And he said, I'm not coming all the way over there for nothing. And he said, no, you got to see this. So at the time he said, yeah, whatever, just take a picture of it. So he took a picture of it. And so when they got to the the logging roads out, spur roads everywhere. So he got to the spur road below, and he showed him. He said, where was that? He said, right up there on the left. And there was two of them that he could see, and then there's kind of shaly, and he didn't follow them. They were going crossways to him. So he had a picture of a track, and I said, you're kidding. He said, no. He looked on his phone. He said, I thought it was on his phone. Well, Kyle's got it. I'll get it from him, and I haven't got it yet. But so they seen a track, and then there's an area up there where there's a bunch of trailers people put in the national forest. It's not actually an official campground, but it's about a half to a mile long, and there's a bunch of camp trailers on the left. And it's called Indian Valley, just so anybody knows where it is. So I've never camped there, but I've always gone past there and seen hunters, and there's deer hanging and stuff, so I knew they were, doing good. Well, he camps there now, and I hunt east of there. I kind of stay away from that area, but there's a lot of hunters. Well, he said this one guy that everybody kind of walks camp to camp, talking to other hunters, see if they, seen anything or whatever. So this one guy was the very next camp next to him, and I guess it was a couple weeks into deer season. He said that guy came back like Saturday evening from a hunt, and he seen him over there, and they were cooking and stuff, and he was throwing all his stuff in his camp trailer, and he hooked up and just split. And he was talking to two of the other campers right next to him above them, and he was an eyewitness. One ran across the road from his right to left and stopped on the embankment. I believe the guy said about 25 yards, and turned sideways and looked at him in the corner of the headlight. And it freaked him out so bad he hooked his trailer up and left and never came back the rest of deer season. So my friend's supposed to see if he can get a hold of this guy, because he's from, nearby the area, and he kind of caught his name and stuff. So he's going to try to get a hold of him and see if he can talk to me or Will or whatever, because he was an eyewitness. So, and then there was some screams heard in the same area, and then there was some other tracks found in this whole area during the same time frame of deer season, which is about 5 weeks. And ironically, I was hunting literally on top of the area, and I went through that area. And I did note that alongside the road, we was traveling from one spot to another on a bike, and we come around the corner, and there was about 2 giant piles of drip line. They had a hell of a marijuana bust in that Butter Creek canyon in there. And I was going to walk in there the first weekend with my wife. And so all this activity was right in that Butter Creek basin. And then when John told me, and he'd seen the marijuana pipe, the Forest Service busted him, laid it next to the road, probably, got rid of the stuff later. I told him, well, John, there was a big bust down there. And he said, yeah, I saw the log go up there opening weekend, which I was probably too far east to see or hear this. And I couldn't believe that they saw tracks down there, and this eyewitness was close to there where, this all had happened previously. But so that was all that was going on out there. I'm supposed to trying to get the track photos from Kyle. He's in Idaho, so he works in the woods and stuff too. But John wasn't sure if he was comfortable showing us the photos, because he showed a couple friends and they kind of laughed at him, that kind of thing. So so that was that stuff. The area there does have some history. Like I said, back in the 90s, there was 3 eyewitnesses. One was a Forest Service lady, close to that same area. And it's south of Heim Palm. It's between Hayfork and Heim Palm, Butter Creek, Indian Valley area. Heim Palm has a history of tracks. I don't know if there was any sightings in the same time frame when the Bluff Creek stuff was going on. Yeah, they were also building logging roads.
All the way back to the early 60s at least.
Yeah. And like I was telling Will, my grandpa built logging roads for Ray Wallace in Bluff Creek and Heim Palm, and it's kind of sad. I wish I would ask my grandpa a lot more. I did ask him once what happened out there and all that stuff a long time ago, and my grandpa just used to just laugh and say, "Oh, it was nothing." You know, maybe he had some experiences. He didn't want to talk about it, but so yeah, Heim Palm there's pretty close to where this stuff happened last year. It's probably 3 or 4 miles south of Heim Palm, where the stuff last deer season happened, and so it really blew my mind because I was all over that area walking, and I've been all over that area for the last few years, and it's a place I previously hunted a lot 20 years ago, and then I moved around, and I just can't believe that all the years in the woods, all the thousands of miles I've hiked, I've never seen nothing, no tracks. And most people will tell you I walk all day hunting. I stop, well, me and my wife, we stop, we watch, we walk, and I'm down in the middle of nowhere, and we've found many, many, many marijuana grows. So that's how far down in those places we get. Those are really pretty hidden. So I'm still to this day just puzzled that, you know, some people have incidences, just one little outing to the woods and have an eyewitness account, and I've been all over. I've had 2 audible things that I can't explain, which I'm not going to put my finger on that was that, because, you know, no one's an expert, you know, to prove different, but I think it's probable, you know, and I do believe, watching the Patterson Gimlin film, you know, it's just kind of built in your human things where you just, you know, you see something and you know what it is. When the first time I saw Patterson thing, I was a little bitty kid, but you know, later in life they've kind of cleaned the film up and stuff, and just looking at it, no one has to convince me that's not human. I mean, you can see that's not the way a human walks. So I believe that is what it is, either, you know, primate or part something, part, you know, part human, part something else. But so you know, I believe it's highly probable, but I've never seen one. So
you were in that area. Now, how are you saying it? And I apologize. Were you saying it was Heim Palm? How do you spell that area?
It's Hyampom. It's west of Ampom.
Oh, okay, all right.
And it's west of Hayfork, California. By road, they're about 19 miles apart. So about air miles, it's, you know, probably 15.
Yeah.
So it has some history. I know in the 90s, and there might possibly be some stuff. I know Heim Palm, you know, like Will said, you know, in the 60s and stuff, but Hayfork, in that area, they might have had some 60s, 70s, 80s, you know, kind of stuff. But I know the 90s, because Beefro was up there. I saw him, and there was 3 eyewitnesses, which one was, like I said, a Forest Service gal. So, and then I have another place. What's that, Tom?
Oh, no, I was just going to ask, you had mentioned just a minute ago about a sound one of the creatures made. Did you hear it, or was it your friends that were out hunting that heard that?
Well, I don't know if you remember the audibles that I had in 92. So I bought a brand new truck that year. Right. I was with an older hunter friend and a younger friend, and we had talked on the show. We'll have to get Will to pronounce it again. Is it Snohomish? How do you say that word in Washington? Snohomish?
Snohomish?
Snohomish, the sound that they recorded there, that and the Klamath. There's a Klamath one. Yep. When I heard those on the internet, you know, and, you know, she's, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, whatever, I stood up, and that was the exact thing that I heard. It's kind of coyote-ish, you know. And
yeah, it lasts a lot longer. That's the exact.
Yeah, it was a long sequence, and I heard possibly 3, because it was in one spot behind us in the canyon up coming out of the Canada Creek down there, or Canadian Creek, and then it was up behind us and up the hill, and then there was one below us, and the one above the hill seemed to move. The next time it made a cadence kind of thing, but like I said, that dog. I was pretty much the whole time, we were armed, you know, and I was pretty much the whole time grabbing the dog and throwing the dog's name was Bud, throwing him back to the tailgate, you know, you're the dog, get out there. And this dog, I mean, I was just blown away that this dog that I'd seen, you know, it treat a mountain lion on a log deck, you know, treat a bear, the thing, I always knew it was going to get in trouble for, not being afraid of anything. It was going to run up to a rattlesnake or something face to face and get bit or whatever.
Right, right. Well, that's, and that seems to be real typical with dogs. And that's another thing that fascinates me is
Yeah.
why is it that we have dogs that are not afraid of bears, even grizzly bears, wolves, lions, but is it a smell? They pick up on something with the Sasquatch that seems to just sends them off, just in terror. Quick question. Hey, Todd, this is what I meant to ask you last time we had John, and we had some technical difficulties. How does it feel on a show and no skeptics? People just, and I know the feeling. The first time I got on the show and I'm talking to people, I don't have to convince them.
Pardon me, fellas. There's some water going. I can hear that in the recording.
I can hear it.
So I heard some sort of interference, but I thought it was static.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So Tom, I thought you said.
Sorry,
There's a storm. It's from me.
Picks everything up.
Yeah, it's from me.
Oh, okay.
We got a storm coming in. I had to go out and do something real quick. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But Tom, I think you said, how did I feel talking on a show without skeptics?
Right.
Is that what you said?
You'll have people that are, not skeptical of what you say.
Yeah, it feels, it doesn't feel like, going up to a total stranger and, telling this thing, because I literally only told, my parents don't even know. I only told a couple people my encounter, and then I had another one. I think I told one person about some noise that I heard on Redwood Creek in the headwaters, but I pretty much just, kept it to myself, because I was saying previously, I was born and raised in the North State, and people joke up here, about Bigfoot. They say, oh yeah, Bigfoot, or my lawn chair is missing. Oh, Bigfoot must have done it. So it's, you don't just go out and start talking about Bigfoot around here, because people make fun of you. And
you're right about that. I also had a family member that his dad had worked on in Happy Camp. He'd worked on the log, back in the 50s when they were making the roads. So I called down to a society down there, a museum, and the gal who runs it is retired law enforcement. And I didn't tell her why I was calling. I was just getting some information. And pretty soon, when I described the situation, she said, oh, Bigfoot. And honestly, it was like we were talking about the price of pork bellies and beans on the exchange. I mean, it was just as normal as can be. And I found that kind of refreshing. That's a good thing.
Yeah. Hey, I wanted to ask Steve, our guest, you said the first encounter, you just heard one run off, and would you say through water?
Yeah, there was a swamp. This swamp ran through the whole wildlife management area, kind of like a creek, and then it would get wide, but there was a lot of cypress. It was a place that most people would not go in. I mean, I would go in them, but generally, if the water was deep or whatever, I wouldn't go in there, because there are alligators and whatnot, and generally the deer aren't going to be walking in 5 foot of water or whatever. So, but this swamp.
Do you think that's how deep the water was when you heard the steps, or was it? I mean, was it like sloshing through the water, or was it running on, a shallow area?
It was running in a shallow area. The water was not that deep. I could have went in the swamp, but I wanted to check this other side because I was gun hunting. And where this thing had ran, it was right up on the edge of the swamp, near kind of, let's say, the palmetto field. And there was a trail running right along the edge of the swamp. And I was not very far from it when I'm going to say 20 yards, when it started crashing off. And it it didn't see me.
Yeah.
It smelled me. It might have heard me a little bit, but it definitely didn't see me.
Yeah. Did you hear it for quite a ways? Like you could tell it made a lot of distance quick, or?
Yes. It ran, didn't run super duper fast, but it ran, like just made the pounding of feet is how I remembered. It wasn't like a deer will make. And it was breaking large pieces of wood. It was not snap crackle. It was cracking sounds. This thing was running over deadfall and crashing through stuff it was breaking some. It was heavy, whatever it was.
Steve,
was that the one that broke the live oak?
This is on the complete other end of the swamp, but that they are connected though.
Well, when you saw the live oak broke, was it tossed or was it just dropped, like right where it snapped?
It was dropped.
They grabbed it and snapped it, or?
It was dropped. It looked like it fell straight down to me.
Yeah.
That tree probably was broken off about 10 feet to 12 feet above my head when I was walking on the ground. And that branch was very long, and it kind of swooped down toward the ground. All I can think of, brother, is something was just grabbed a hold of that thing and just snapped it, or it was up there watching me, and I never even knew it was watching me. In retrospect. But I don't know. It may have been where it just break, because trees do that sometimes. Sometimes.
Yeah.
But if you know anything about live oak trees, they're very strong.
Oh, they're really strong. Hey, Steve.
Well, not during the snow, they ain't.
No.
I live in snow country, and we had a heck of a snowstorm this year. And if you were a firewood cutter, you could cut firewood the rest of your life, because that with the evergreen leaves, they catch snow.
Yeah, absolutely.
And snap like toothpicks. But when you saw the pair, you said 200 yards, and you said one was a female.
Yes, one. It was completely obvious that one was a female. Absolutely.
Yeah. What color were they, Steve?
The female was black, jet black, and the male was kind of like reddish, brownish.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a solid color. It was light red and dark red.
Right.
Kind of like orangutan-ish.
Yep.
Buckskin color looking. It had that.
He was an older, mature.
And he was very tall.
Yep.
And I remember his arms were very long, and he was just swinging them, walking and easy, because it was really hot out. I remember the temperature was hot, and he just was easing. And it didn't really shock me a whole lot when I seen what got my attention was I seen something walking without an orange vest on. Because this is a place I've been shot at 5 times at this place. Not literally, but I mean, I've had bullets hit the tree I was in, just from people discharging their firearms or being too close to whatever. So it's very important in a wildlife management area to wear your orange, because that's the only thing that differentiates you from your camouflage. You can't see people when you're in camo.
Well, there was an incident a few months back where some guy in Montana, I think, had shot at another person, and when he was caught by law enforcement, I asked him, I said, "Why'd you do this?" He said, "Well, he wasn't wearing a vest, so I thought it was a big," and it's kind of a lame excuse, but well, I understand the value of wearing that day glow and the bright orange.
It's about, I'm a very ethical hunter, and, obviously, if you know anything about traditional hunting, you have to give up a lot when you do that. When I am hunting with my bows, my long bows and recurves, I rely on my skills as a caller and intuition and whatever to get this deer within 15 yards of my tree stand so I can take an ethical shot for it.
Right.
And I wait.
You said go ahead.
No, go ahead, Todd.
Oh, you said you saw the male, the red one, you described it as linky. What
Yeah.
about it made you think it was linky? Did it seem tall and skinny, or longer armed than normal, or long-legged?
Very tall, not really long-legged, but very tall torso and long arms. Just, it was very tall and skinny. And the caveman thing comes to my mind. He just looked like a daggum caveman.
When you say that was something I was going to ask next. When you say it reminds you of caveman or Neanderthal, did it seem like the fur was not very thick? Like just kind of, you could see some skin maybe here and there?
No, I couldn't see no skin. I could see a little bit of darker skin on the face, but it was just too far away to really be able to, differentiate between skin and hair. But they definitely had hair on them. And the female that's where, when I was looking at her, I was wondering, what is she holding? And that, so the only thing I could, because I didn't see a head or legs or anything, whatever it was, looked to me like it was wrapped around her waist and it was bulging out. And she was holding it. Because when she ran, she struggled running. She hobbled holding this thing.
Let me ask you this. Do you think she was pregnant?
She may have been. Well, and I have mentioned that. If you look in my original report back in 95 or 6, I'm thinking that she was it could have been either or. She was pregnant, very pregnant, or holding an infant. So, but she was very shocked when she looked up the road and saw us looking at her. It definitely changed her whole thing. She just ran like crazy.
I was going to ask the same question Will just said, but this might go along with it. But, I hunt, you hunt and stuff like that. But, 175, 200 yards, to see breast, they must have been, fairly larger. I mean, obviously not little 200 yards. I mean, that was without a scope, right?
Oh, yeah, naked eye. It was, I'm going to say, it was less than 200 yards. Probably 175, give or take. But still,
So that could go along with pregnancy, larger breasts possibly,
yes,
what Will was saying.
Because Jim and I joked on, that's the first thing that Jim said. That's a damn gal. And I can't really say on air what he said about her.
Yeah.
But, he said, that's a dang gal. That's the first thing he said. And then, then we went off with the, all the other stuff. And oh, man. I mean,
Steve, you noticed her behavior change when she saw you guys. You saw she suddenly sped up, or did you notice like a sort of a state of shock? Or
I noticed an old crap look.
Okay.
And that's the only way I can say it is old crap. That's how she reacted when she was going across the road, following her man or whatever it was, and she turned down and looked and went, whoa, and you could just see her reaction change. Her whole demeanor, her whole mannerism changed. As soon as she seen Jim and I standing there looking at her.
Steve, let me ask you, did the male's behavior change?
No, the male didn't even see us. The male came out on an angle going away from us, and he came out and he came straight out, and then he turned to the left kind of and walked down the road, and he did not see us looking at him. And he just kind of walked down about 20 yards, and then he turned right and went into the palmettos. And he, and then I couldn't see him no more. And that's what I was looking at, and then the other one popped out. But the female did not come out until he was on the other side of the road and out of sight. So she was probably 50 yards behind him.
Steve,
did they? What was their appearance look like? I mean, they had, you've seen the Patterson thing. Did they have like
the little
sloped heads or?
I'm going to say that yes, their heads look kind of pointy, more pointier. It was definitely not a human head. But I don't know. This caveman thing just keeps coming to mind.
When Mayo walked across the road, was he? And he didn't even look at you guys. Was he He said he's going at an angle, but was his backside to you? Or
yes, It started off, he walked out, because I guess they were coming kind of toward us on an angle out of this trail, and they came out onto the road, and he cut left, like turned and just walked the other way. And he never looked at me, and this is when Jim was unloading his stuff. That's when I seen him. And then he walked down the road, and I'm going, hey, Jim, look at this guy. And then he's seen him before he walked in. And then the other one came out. And I think the other one came out in possibly a little bit different area, not much, maybe 20 feet of a different area. But she came out and walked right to the edge of the road and got about 2 steps in the road and looked down. And she was walking kind of slow. And, then she seen us and then completely changed her gait and kind of hobbled off. I mean, you can tell she was having trouble running.
Yeah. What time of day was this? Was this like morning?
It's about 11 o'clock in the morning.
Really? So this is broad daylight.
Broad daylight. And Thanksgiving, too. And I don't know what it is about Thanksgiving, but I've heard several stories, quite a few stories about Thanksgiving hunters seeing weird things. There was another guy that saw something out in the same place, relatively the same. This was a huge, huge swamp. This is 80 something thousand acres.
Oh yeah, it's big.
Yes, very big. There's free-range cattle out there occasionally and whatnot. Lots of deer, lots of pigs. Lots of swamp.
What gets me are those. I've been in Florida before. Those palmetto thickets. Running into a palmetto is like running into a bunch of razor blades. I mean, they're just nasty.
Oh, absolutely. And hey, here's another thing I didn't tell you guys. When I went back out there the following weekend, I did say that, with this girl from BFRO. And she wanted to go into the palmettos. And I said, okay, I'll go in there with you. So I had a sidearm. So we got on our hands and knees and we kind of walked into this area. And inside of this, it opens up. There was trails in there. There was things where you could walk in. All we had to do is bend down and we could walk. It opened up in there, but yet it was still covered, kind of canopy-ish, I guess you could say.
Right. Yeah, I've seen that. It's interesting because you get in there and you've got the palmettos, you've got the, you've got these, pine trees, but then you also have the deciduous trees of, I don't know what they are, but whatever's in the swamp,
Yeah, gallberries mainly one of the big small myrtle bushes, but the palms, a lot of things go in the palms to get out of the heat. Oh. And when you go,
running through a palmetto thicket. I mean, it's like running through a bunch of razor blades.
Not only that, Tom, it's extremely noisy.
Yeah.
When these creatures went in there, we were down there within a minute, and there was no noise. They went in there and they squatted. I know they did.
You're talking about the Sasquatch squatted, or?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm saying when they went in there and they squatted down and hunkered down, because I'll bet that female went in there and gestured or whatever that they were busted.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Because she was squabbling, she was running. So I'm sure he was, kind of whatever he was doing back in there, and then she come running, and I'm sure these things can communicate.
Oh, yeah, sure. I bet that's an interesting observation.
Yes, and another thing, if we would have went in there, that male would have been probably aggressive to us.
Yeah, I don't think you want to test that one out, do you?
No, I mean, in retrospect, thinking of all, back, knowing what I know now and hearing what I've heard, all the stories over the years and of people and, walking up on these things, they're more aggressive when they're in a family group. And it seems like there are always more than one around. And, I had guys calling me up asking me about this. Wow, where'd you see him? Can you give me the coordinates? I said, well, what do you want this for? Well, I'm a hunter and I'm trying. I said, dude, I'm not going to tell you about that. I said, I don't want you to shoot one of these things. And I had several people call me about that.
And you had mentioned that you had also, after having the sighting, but before reading up on these things, it still rattled you, right? I mean, you're still afraid of these things. You said you were paranoid.
Tom, this is a life changer for an outdoorsman. It's like, it's like Todd says, you can spend your whole life in the woods walking thousands of miles and not see one of these things. And yet somebody can go out and just, be, eating a banana on the side of the road, waiting for somebody to pick them up, and here comes 2 of them or whatever. It's just completely, I don't know, it's just random.
Well, it's random, and you're also out there with something that's larger than you. It's on 2 legs. It's got to be absolutely rattling to see that.
Which you do not believe in, which you've never seen, and your world is no longer the same as an outdoorsman. Now you know that you're not the apex predator anymore. These things are massive. I don't even know how strong these things are and how powerful, what they can do. But I know one thing: I would not want to fight one, and I worry about this. I carry a firearm. I sleep with a firearm under my pillow. I have a firearm under my sofa. I have a firearm under my coffee table. I got one in my shop. I've got guns everywhere, and I know how to use guns, and I'm not crazy. I'm just saying I'm not going to be caught where I can't defend. I'm kind of old now. I can't fight no more. And I certainly don't want to fight one of these things, So, and I don't want to shoot one, but I don't want to be caught completely helpless, because if I'm going to get whooped by one of these things, he's going to get a bullet in the head. I would not shoot one only unless he was attacking me. If I saw one and he was screaming at me, I would just turn around. I'd probably raise my hands and say, okay, I'm leaving. I'm out. Hopefully I'd survive that and I'd leave and he wouldn't attack me. But, I know that sounds kind of weird, but this is what's been going in my head all these years. And I still hunt every year. I go up to Indiana and I go hunting every year. And, I get up at 4 a.m. and I go out and it's, dark and I'm walking in the woods and I got my handgun out. And I'm just thinking, and I see, eyes and whatnot in the distance. And I'm thinking, I hope that's a coyote or whatever,
Yeah, I bet. Well, hey, listen, before we wrap it up, any final questions for either one of you or any of us?
Well,
I'll go with you first. Any final thoughts or questions?
don't hear any.
That's okay.
All right.
Who are you talking to, Tommy? Did you say Steve?
Todd.
I was waiting for somebody to say. Well, I didn't hear you say me.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Any questions or?
Well, I'd expressed, like I think you did too, but when I've never seen anything, but what I heard was pretty nerve-wracking. But I don't care where I go, work, hunting, or whatever, especially hunting, you have a plan in your head, where everybody's going to go. But as soon as I get there, I get out and I start down in the woods. My plan's in the back of my mind that the first thing is the subject, because I've never seen one, but, there's a pretty strong possibility. So it's almost like I can't avoid it. It's just in the small seed in your brain. When you get there, it's the only thing you're thinking of. And then I have to try to rethink my plan. Where was I going to walk? And, because you just get that on your mind ever since. I never had that before.
Yeah. It's a life changer.
So I know what Steve's saying, but.
Yeah. Yep. I just want to know what I can do to be able to enjoy myself. You know, how can I defend myself? What not to do? I know what to look for now. I mean, I know the signs. I know there are warning signs. But you know, how can I just be at peace and
Steve, we'll send you some stuff to give you that peace of mind where you can keep yourself protected.
Well, I appreciate that.
Well, stay home and play hunting simulation games.
Well, you know, I play a lot of those anyway. I'm very involved in this industry. I build handcrafted long bows and recurves. I mean, it's my life. You know,
What poundage are those?
Every poundage you want. They're custom. I build them for you. I build them for your draw length. They're high performance, cool. High end.
Awesome.
I do have one question for Will. I was wondering.
Sure.
I had heard that you had been mentioning, and I believe I've seen or heard the proof of this. There's different species of these things, because I've heard of some of them that look like a human or
mm-hmm.
caveman or whatever, and then you get some that look more like kind of ape. You have some that look more large, and some with a pronounced face, I guess, mm-hmm. doggish, however, canine.
Correct, yes.
And of course, their attitudes modify between each, you know, some being less aggressive or whatever. I think personally down here, they're not as big as the ones up north, but really in southern areas like Florida, nothing's really as big as the things are is in the northern area. And
right.
probably
and they're a little more adapted to, you know, the various types of climates where they are and surroundings. So, for instance, you know, out here on the West Coast, where it's mountainous, we get things like you see in the Patterson film that are very large, very bulky, very, very muscular.
Yes.
For dealing with the mountains. They've adapted to that environment. Farther east, where it's flatter, not so mountainous, they're a little leaner and more designed for running, not so much climbing. So it really depends on the environment they've adapted to. But yeah, there are two major groupings with a couple of different subgroupings in each one of those. But even out of those four, there's minor variations in different regions. So
yeah, I mean, I've heard some absolutely petrifying stories of other weird things, and you know, this is like a nightmare, and you feed on it because you want to learn.
Right.
What not to do and what to do, you know. But don't get me wrong. I'm not letting it drive me nuts. This is this helps me a lot because I get to learn stuff. I'm still alive, and you know, I don't really live where they are right now, but it is affecting my life. You know, I want to take an elk hunt one day. I'm definitely not going to go in those mountains and camp.
Well, we'll definitely help you out with that. So we do need to wrap up, fellas. We're just about out of time. I really want to thank Stephen, you, and Todd for joining us for this segment. Folks, we're going to take a short break and stay tuned for the next segment. But, fellas, much appreciated. And, Stephen, keep in touch, and we'll help you out.
Well, thanks for listening.
Absolutely. Very fascinating.
All right. Take care.
Bye now.
Welcome back to the second segment, everyone. We've got TW with us, with Tom and I still haven't heard from Brian, so Brian must have had something come up this evening, so we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. TW, Tom hasn't heard this yet. Update us on what happened yesterday.
Well, it wasn't yesterday. It was Monday.
Oh, Monday, okay.
I got a call about 5:30 in the evening, and one of the guys that I earlier had had mentioned on earlier programs, the individual that lost his finger, I don't know if we had mentioned it before, but he had passed away here not long ago. He finally decided that it was time to check out. And his boy was the one that called me and said, "Hey, look, we got an issue up here, not far from where Dad's, old place was. Can you go up there and check it out and see what the people said?" And I said, "All right, for the sake of, because I don't want to put this guy out there in the middle of, everybody's business, giving his name out, because he didn't give me permission. Of course, I hadn't asked either, but we'll just call him John Jr." So, anyways, I said, "Well, give me some background. What's going on?" And he said, "Well, this is what happened today. That apparently a Bigfoot come out of the undergrowth, ran right towards them, grabbed the family pet, picked it up, pulled it apart, and threw both halves at the owner." They were both of them, they're in their 60s, were out in the, backyard or, side yard doing lawn work, picking up the lawn and, killing off weeds or trying to kill off weeds and cultivating dirt. And that's what you do where you're at. I'm like, okay. And, they're a little booger. So can you go out there and check it out? And I said, yeah. So I'm on my way out there, and I call Will up and tell him where I'm going. And of course, being where I'm located at, we got the worst cell phone service in the world because it's hit or miss. Are you within a range of a tower? So halfway, almost to that place, finally the phone dies, and I can't even talk to Will. And he said, "Hey, look, dude, I'm sick. Call me tomorrow and let me know what's going on." I said, okay. So I show up, and by the time I get out there, it's dark. And, to give you some background on me, I'm after I get the phone call, my wife walks in the house, and I'm already dressed, heading out the door with a shotgun. And she said, "Where the hell you go with that shotgun?" And I'm like, "I got something to go do." So I get out there and meet the people. Very nice. I don't want to call them elderly, but they're in their 60s. It's a family farm, ranch. And they said, "Well, this is what's been going on. Not that we don't know that these creatures aren't around. We do. We've had some, intermittent encounters. See the backside going off into the undergrowth, that kind of stuff. A lot of whooping, a lot of hollering. Had been roared at a couple of times." And I said, "Well, you just probably got too close. It's usually the alpha that's going to roar at you, and it's usually if you're too close to the family group." So I said, "Well, what happened?" They said, "Well, we got a half pit bull, half bull mastiff, family pet. This thing come out of the undergrowth, grabbed the dog before the dog even realized what was going on. Picked the dog up, pulled the dog apart." And this is a full-grown bull mastiff, half pit bull. So this isn't a small dog. Pulls the dog apart, throws both ends at the owner, and just stares and glares at him. And I said, "Okay. Well, show me the carcass of your dog." "We can't." "Why not?" "Sheriff come picked it up." "What do you mean the sheriff come picked it up?" "Well, after it happened, we called the sheriff. Deputy sheriff shows up. We tell him what happened. Deputy sheriff grabs both halves of the dog and takes off." I'm like, "Well, this isn't, kind of bold and well." And they said, "Oh, we got pictures." I said, "You do?" They said, "Yeah, we got pictures." So they showed me, and I'm like, holy shit, this isn't a small dog. This dog was every bit of 120, 130 pounds. So I said, well, show me where it happened. They took me out there, and there's blood everywhere. And as dark as it was, even with a flashlight, I could tell that there was a lot of blood on the ground. Most of it's pretty well dried up and turned, kind of that real dark brick red color when it gets dry. And they said, you want to go into the undergrowth, see where it went? And I was like, hell no, I don't want to go to the undergrowth, see where it went. Are you insane? If he's going to do that to the dog, what the hell do you think he's going to do to me? He's going to turn me into a pretzel. So, anyways, I said, well, okay, describe the creature to me. And they said, well, he's about 7.5, 8 feet tall, really broad at the shoulders. Hair coat was, kind of a brownish with black tinge color to it. The skin was, what we could see of the skin was grayish black. We couldn't see any whites of the eyes, but we could see the eyes. I said, did it make any noises? And they said, well, we had heard some whooping afterwards. I said, okay. I said, well, can you tell me what's been going on? And they said, well, not that we think that there's anything related to this, but, put out some rat poison to get rid of the rats that are in the area and some of the ground squirrels. And they put down a rat poison called Tomcat. It's very distinctive. It's about 5.5, 6 inches long. They're like in a big X, but very long, like an extruded nugget. And very green colored. Well, the active ingredient in most rat poison is vitamin K. It's potassium. And another ingredient of vitamin X. Well, I'm not quite sure what vitamin X is, but it's an anticoagulant. And basically what rat poison does is it causes the rodents to internally bleed to death over time. And I said, okay. I said, what does that got to do with it? And they said, well, we put it out a couple of weeks ago, and, it just come up missing. I said, you put out rat poison with a dog around? They said, yeah. And I said, and it's been a couple of weeks. Yeah, well, I know the dog didn't take it. Dog didn't eat it. I said, okay, well, rat poison works within a week. I said, all right. So they'd had, like I said, they'd had some whooping and some, howling and some, got growled at a couple of times when they walked up on top of one of the hills. And they've had some livestock feed come up missing. Where livestock and, they have goats and cattle. And, they'd see the goats down on one end of the pasture and not that they'd seen anything, but they knew what was going on. If all the goats are huddled in the one corner of the pasture, they're pretty well spooked. And, go out there an hour later and there's no feed left. Well, they know damn good and well that the goats didn't eat it. So, and they'd had a couple of bags come up missing. So I said, all right. I said, does your dog go out into the undergrowth, out into up into the hills? And they said, well, every now and again, but he's usually with us. And I said, well, this is what I'm thinking. It could be two things. One, the dog was tormenting the family group, and the alpha come out and pretty much got rid of the dog, which isn't unheard of. But generally, if they're going to get rid of the dog, they're not going to rip him in half and throw both halves at you. They'll just snap his neck and let him lay there, or they'll take him off and eat him. The other thing is I'm wondering, because you put out rat poison, because they'd had some, like I said, they'd had some feed come up missing. They had some salt blocks come up missing. I'm wondering if one of them or a couple of them or a juvenile didn't grab the rat poison, take off and eat it. And they said, well, what would that do? And I said, well, if you killed one of them, they're not going to be real terribly pleased with you. Because they're going to connect rat poison to you. You put it out, and it caused one of them to die. They're not stupid. A lot of people think they're just a dumb animal, and in some respects they are. They're just an animal. But in other respects, they're not just an animal. So you need to be, kind of careful about that. Or was it a secondary poisoning where they ate an animal that ate the rat poison? Still, they're going to connect that to you. They're like I said, they're not stupid. One of the things that these creatures like to do is they like to eat soft tissue parts. They'll eat some of the entrails, some of the stomach, heart, liver, kidneys, lungs, soft tissue, eyes, so really soft tissue. So if they happen to eat something that ate the rat poison, it's still going to make them sick. And this is, go ahead.
TW, a quick question. It's on the rat poisoning, because we use some of that around here. We had a real rat problem. We lived in a rural area.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that the people that sold it to us said, well, I said, well, what happens if the cat eats the rat? And he goes, no, it's a secondary. I don't know how it works, but he said the secondary poisoning doesn't work. But you're thinking this thing may have just, because apparently it smells good. It really attracts animals.
I think it's a corn-based product with all these chemicals mixed in that gets extruded out.
Okay. And so you think that they just connected and figured you guys did it. How come it went after the dog? Was the dog chasing this thing, or?
No, I mean, the dog was in the yard, and before the dog realized what was going on, the thing was already out of the undergrowth and on top of the dog, and picked the dog up and pulled him apart.
Wow.
He said, that's how quick this happened. And I said, well, how long did he stand there and look at you? He said, it seemed like it was forever.
It kind of sounds like there was some kind of a grudge against the dog. It focused on the dog.
Well, and that's what I'm wondering, if this isn't, because, maybe I'm just kind of, they call it anthropomorphism, where you associate animal behavior with human behavior.
Yeah,
or you assign human behavior to animals.
Right, you're placing human attributes on animals.
Yeah. What would a human do to get a point across to somebody? Well, hell, like kill a family pet.
That's an excuse me. That's an interesting perspective. That they're intelligent enough to connect the rat poisoning to the people, and I don't know, maybe kill the dog to say. And you can't help but wondering, if this happened Monday, who's next? What's next?
Well, and that when after I'd seen the area, and it was a bloodbath. You want to go see where he went? Hell no, I don't want to go see where he went. She was saying.
It kind of reminds me of, there was a guy interviewed in the Carolinas a few years back, and he talked about there were a number of domestic animals, of course dogs, all the way up to a horse that was killed by one of these things. It was done in each case in a very gruesome way, and the animal was left where people would find it, and he never surmised the reason it was doing this, but there must have been some sort of a grudge or something it had against the local people.
Here's the thing. I'd spent most of yesterday, because the very next morning I get a phone call, guess what, we're sending you to Artesia to work. I'm like, great. I spent most of yesterday, researching different stories. And I'm not opposed to going to, like GCBRO website and read their they have a very good database as far as encounters. And the BFRO is okay. It's not great. But, you got to go to where you can kind of suss out stories. And there's a few stories where they've talked about these creatures going after pets, where either the dog has been barking at them or lets the owners know when they're around, and they'll go after the dog.
TW, do you think that the BFRO has a policy or a stance that these creatures are harmful only to pets but not to humans, or have you any thoughts on that?
Here's my stance on the BFRO. It's ran by a bunch of morons.
Well, don't hold back.
No, their lead person, Matt Moneymaker. He needs to change his name to Monkey Boy. There's a squatch in these woods. Oh, okay, go ahead, smoke another doobie, because you couldn't make it as an attorney.
Hey, I was thinking when you were talking about going after pets or animals, it made me think back to when you first had a situation, where the older couple had their window smashed in, and then you found all those dogs tore up.
Yeah, well, I didn't find them. It was the animal control officer was telling me about it at lunch.
I see.
I wanted to go see where it was. Of course, she got in a shitload of trouble over that. There's a lot of pit bulls that run loose in the El Paso area.
I wonder if there's any behavioral correlation there.
I don't know. I mean, this whole encounter defies explanation of what we're used to. And like I said, I've racked my head around this for the past 2 days.
Well, I think the problem is not having a large enough context. Plus, it's in the same area as where John had his encounter where his finger got bit off.
Exactly.
So there's kind of when you look at the larger picture, there's kind of a history of this sort of behavior.
Yeah. Well, it's not that far from where the Indian cowboy decided he was going to zap one with a cattle prod, because they took me to that site afterwards.
Tom, have you heard that story?
Oh, I have listened to it so many times, over and over again. I love that one. And like I said, the first time I listened to it, I had tears in my eyes. I immediately sent it to my older brother and said, you're going to love this. Especially with your comment you got, and that's when the rodeo started.
Let me ask you, too, how far generally is it from where the kid was kind of pulled off his bike?
Oh, shit, that's probably 120 miles.
Okay. But there's enough in that area where there's a history of behavior.
Well, yeah, because, here's the thing, and it's a lot of open land. You have McGregor Range, you have White Sands Missile Range, you have White Sands proper. You've got the Oregon Mountains, the Rio Grande Upper Valley. Then you go into the Alamogordo area, and then you've got, from there you go, over to the Petroglyphs area, which isn't but, another 15, 20 miles. There's a lot of area there that they could hide and travel and not be detected, because it's not heavily populated.
Well, do they have a good
So-
food source?
Go ahead.
Do they have a good food source like deer or elk or any of that kind
Oh,
of stuff?
they got all kinds of food in that area. Besides, going over there and skimming from the ranchers or their livestock feed.
I'll tell you one thing. Going to Albuquerque, you hear coyotes everywhere. There's lots of wildlife.
Yeah, I mean, there's bear, there's elk, there's mule deer, there's white-tailed deer, coons, possums.
There's timber around there, right? There's a tree, like.
Oh, yeah, because you go from the pinyon junipers up into the pondy pines and aspens, and these are sky islands. What Aldo Leopold and Miriam had called sky islands. These are heavily forested areas that are up in elevation, surrounded by desert.
Well,
and there's go ahead.
Well, I just wonder, is this couple, I mean, if this happened, Monday, are these guys like still in danger? It sounds like they might.
Well, the thing is, by the time we got done, after they showed me where the Indian cowboy was basically harassed in the hayloft, and that's a whole other story. I think because I actually crawled up into the hayloft, and I'm like, well, there's not a lot of room. It's been hard for a Sasquatch to get up in there. Because it's only from the floor of the loft to the roof is only like a 4-foot span. So they'd have had a hell of a time getting in there. At least, they wouldn't have been able to stand up to it.
I never understood how that guy got away from the Sasquatch. How? Because you got to go down to the floor where all the dead cattle are, right?
Well, what he ended up doing was he jumped out one of the windows and ran to his truck and got into his truck.
I bet he ran. Really ran.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like when the Lone Ranger gets shot in the ass, and or gets bit by a rattlesnake in the ass, and he goes, Tonto, you got to suck out the poison. Oh, you one dead white man, Kimosabe. Tonto drawing limit here. But he had to have, because the thing was, it was raising 9 kinds of hell, and that was the one thing that the man of this couple, it was a family farm, and he said, I remember when that happened. There was red and blue lights all over the place all night long. So
the local enforcement, the law enforcement has an interest in these creatures?
It's more 3-letter agencies.
Oh, okay.
And exactly what 3-letter agency is in charge is the question.
Well,
I think it's a conglomerate of several different agencies are in charge. And there's a general consensus of how they're going to approach this.
Okay.
Well, that's just my take.
Yeah, there's 4 federal land management agencies. I think you got the DOI, and then you've got the agriculture.
Well, you got DOI, USDA, BLM, Park Service.
Yeah. Okay.
And actually, the BLM and Park Service fall under Department of the Interior. So, where the USDA is the Forest Service.
Yeah. They have special agents.
Yeah, and they're actually now in the talks that they're going to try to combine the Forest Service and the Park Service under one umbrella. And here's the thing, because how they do the Park Service approaches land management and how the Forest Service approaches land management is far different from each other.
Yeah.
I could see the BLM and the Forest Service being combined, because one is we have empty space here, come lease the land. We'll put you under the USDA, and that's the BLM. Where the Forest Service actually does lease the land out, they have timber sales. Some areas they don't, not near as much as they used to. Where the Park Service, you can't go in there and cut down a tree.
Right. and I always thought BLM is like, open range, pasture lands, maybe a little bit of mining and stuff like that, but not necessarily forest, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and of course you have NCRS, which is, they fall under USDA too. So, but, it's, the thing is, this is not, there's something going on in that area that these creatures don't like humans being there.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. And what I was wondering is, it sounds like this couple might still, they need to be on edge.
Well, I told them, I said, I wouldn't go out in the yard without a gun.
Well, I was going to ask you if they, if this creature came back, maybe an introduction to Mr. Weatherby or Mr. Barrett wouldn't be in order.
And here's the thing. You got to be real cautious of that approach. Because if you don't kill them, you're going to wish like hell you had. Because they are vindictive.
Yeah.
And where one is, another one ain't far behind. And that was the one thing I told them. I said, if it was the alpha that come out, you can guarantee there's 3 or 4 more in the woods watching you. Because the alpha ain't going to travel by himself. He's going to have an entourage come with him. If it's a beta is definitely going to have one other with him, maybe 2. But the alpha is going to have an entourage where it's going to be a show of force.
Yeah, they're not all that far apart from one another.
So the only difference is that my take is that the alpha is going to be the head sperm slinger. He's going to be the patriarch of the group, where the rest of them are, if they're not related, they're, close ties of some sort. Either through protection by numbers or because one of the other ones just is biding his time to wait for the alpha to get so old that he can overpower him and take over the troop. That's just my take, and I could be totally off dot. But this whole encounter defied every bit of reference logic I had, because I'm still kind of racking my brain going, well, it could be this or it could be that. What would cause this to precipitate to a point of such a rampant show of force and violence?
Well, yeah, it's
in broad daylight.
That's the
thing.
It's broad daylight, and this thing coming out and doing this in front of them. It's like you said, it defies logic, and they normally, Will, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they usually gang up on, if they're going to get a person, they'll gang up on one person if they think they've got some sort of numerical superiority or something.
Yeah, if there's an advantage, sure.
Well, and here's the thing, like a year or so ago, me and Brenda Harris was talking about this very same subject. Not this particular incident, but the subject matter. People being attacked during broad daylight. people being attacked at night when they go out and check on their livestock, getting yanked off their porches, being beat damn near half to death, kids getting yanked out of back of pickups. When the pickup's doing 55 miles an hour, the damn thing comes running right up, grabs a kid, and runs off.
Wow. And that's happened?
That's happened on the reservation. That is documented by Reservation Police Department.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, there's still it's listed as an open case. I got a friend of mine that was he still is. He's an officer for the tribal police. He's a token white guy for the Navajo Nation. So they got one white guy on the department, and he said that the first thing he learned when he got there was that they get calls for, suspicious circumstances, animal disturbance, and he's beating feet to try to get out there to help these people, and he's passing other officers like, why are you doing like 15 miles an hour? What the hell are you doing? And he said, they kind of pulled him aside and said, look, we get those calls. We don't get there in a hurry. Because you may not want to see what the hell's out there. So they are wholeheartedly aware of what's going on.
Yeah, there's a little bit
of... me and Will's talked about this, where they had one old guy get, basically he was beat senseless, and he ended up dying from his internal injuries from one attack. And another guy, if I remember right, how it was explained to me, was yanked off his porch. The thing just ran around the corner, seen him, and grabbed him and just pummeled him right there. But he ended up breaking his neck, and both of those bodies, and this has been within the last 5 years, both of those bodies got shipped to San Antonio. Now, why the hell would you ship 2 bodies to San Antonio when there's a medical examiner in Albuquerque?
Wasn't the other one an older gentleman who went up to see the chickens or something, and his wife witnessed this happening?
Yeah, that was the one that was beat senseless. The other one I think he ended up with a broken neck because it was beating him right there on his, right in front of his porch. But the wife witnessed the one guy go out and check on his, can't remember if it was chickens or if it was goats. It was livestock, and the damn thing just come out of the shadows and just started pummeling him.
Now
had him on the ground.
As a point of interest, what makes it always, I hear things that always makes me think of something else. You actually knew. Now this goes back to the original Legend of Boggy Creek film.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was the family. Remember the scene, Tom, where the arm reached to the window, and then the men went out with the guns to shoot, and one of the guys was grabbed and mauled. And TW actually knew that guy, the person who was that individual.
Yes.
And
Gillum Rogers.
Tell that real quick, and then we'll make the correlation here.
All right. Well, in Boggy Creek, they named him Bobby Ford. His real name was Gillum Rogers. And I ended up meeting him because when I started kind of getting somewhat more curious and somewhat more involved in the subject matter, I ended up meeting a guy that was with the GCBRO, Gulf Coast Bigfoot Research Organization. And that was back when Mary Green was still alive. And God loved Mary Green. She was an absolute saint. And I'd spent some time talking to Mary on the phone, and she said, I want you to meet this guy. So I met this guy. Harold Whitaker is this guy's name. Anyways, Harold, he said, I want you to meet somebody. And I said, really? Because we were talking about Boggy Creek. And my encounter when I was 13 over at Lone Star Lake. And He said, I want you to meet somebody. I said, okay. And he takes me over way to hell past Commerce, Texas, up into the Grand Saline area. And he takes me to this it wasn't a rundown house. It was just it was a little bitty house out in the middle of the woods. And I ended up meeting this guy by the name of Guido Rogers. And, you know, we're talking, and Gillum kind of looks at me and he said, I understand you got an interest in, Boggy Creek and the folk monster. And I said, well, yeah, I mean, who doesn't? I'd like to meet the guy that got thumped, that Bobby Ford. He said, I'm Bob Ford. That was the name that they assigned to me for the movie, because I wouldn't agree to go on the movie and, give my account with my real name. And he, what had happened was, the hand had reached through the screen and didn't grab, touched his sister-in-law. And at the time, Gillum, this was like 1967 or 68. Gillum wasn't but maybe 15 years old. And his brother, another guy, and him run out on the front porch. His brother and this other guy had guns, and they're shooting. And he walks around to the side of the house, and the damn thing was still there. Grabs him, throws him about 15 feet off the porch out into the lawn, and before he even landed, the damn thing was on top of him. And what saved him was, and he said he ended up with a broken nose. His cheekbone was shattered. He had some lacerations that they could only attribute to, wasn't claws, but looked like fingernail scrapes.
Now, what was interesting is how it beat him.
Say, coming in?
You remember how he said it beat him?
Oh, he said it was just on top of him, just pummeling the shit out of him.
But it was.
But
it was using the back of its hands.
Yeah, it was. He said when it hit him, it was like it was the back of his hand was hitting him, and it was the back of his hand was balled up like a fist, like he was pounding nails.
You ever notice in films of chimps doing things like that?
Yeah.
Almost a drum roll with the back of their hands.
Yeah, so he said he ended up, he got tore up pretty good, but he said what saved him was he started screaming. The minute the damn thing grabbed him and threw him, he started screaming. And when he landed, the damn thing was on top of him, pummeling him, and his brother come around with his buddy and started shooting at it. And he said it was hitting him like it was hitting him with the back of his hand, like he was pounding on his, like somebody had hit the ground with the back of their hand,
mm-hmm.
or try to, what's the best way, like you backhand somebody with a balled fist?
Yeah, right.
He said that's what it was like.
I was thinking, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
He said it wasn't very long, but they had to take him to the hospital there in Texarkana. And he checked in. The doctor's like, "What the hell happened to you?" And he said, "I can't explain it. That you would believe me what happened." But he said he ended up with a shattered cheekbone and broken nose, some minor lacerations around the back of his neck and his face. But he said it was brutal, and it was never ending. And if it hadn't been for his brothers, he'd have probably ended up dead.
I think it's easy to make the comparison with his situation and the two elderly gentlemen on the reservation who got beaten, even to your friend John. And in the situation with the dog, in the same, we can use a ballpark general area of the country where we're seeing a lot of these kinds of behaviors.
It's really in the South and Southwest.
Yeah.
You don't hear a lot about this up, I looked for Oklahoma, and the only thing I can find in Oklahoma was up in the Tulsa area close to Missouri. It was, as a matter of fact, it was outside of Broken Bow that a family had basically beat its way through the front door, and the family's making its way out the back door.
Good Lord.
And tore the house up.
And we've heard that other places too. The cowman story. And I actually had someone who knows the family who's getting information for me firsthand. And I'm hoping that comes through fairly soon. But he said that story did actually happen.
And look what happened to John.
Yeah.
After he got his ass whipped, the damn thing tore the house up.
Yep.
I find that, that they use their backhands. I mean, that's something you would, if somebody's going to make up a story, you wouldn't think that that would be something that they would include. Have either one of you, there was a story that I read about a year and a half ago, that there was an Air Force veterinarian who had been tasked with doing a necropsy on one of these things. And later, one of them had attacked her dog, and I think she shot at it, and it did the same thing to her. Have either one of you heard that? It backhanded her with its hand. She still talks, with a lisp now because of that. But the thing that was funny was not only the backhanding, but after the necropsy, have you heard this? The heart was actually not in the position that we would think it is, but it was closer up to the armpit.
I don't think I'm familiar with that story.
Okay.
I ain't either, but I'd like to read it.
If I find it, I'll pass it on, and it could just be more of the internet urban legend stuff.
But I have heard of other stories where, they'll use their hands in a similar fashion like that. So, again, when you look across geography and time, there's very similar behaviors.
Well, you think about it. If they use the palm of their hand and they damage the palms of their hand, then they can't use their hands as well. Maybe that's the reason for using backhanding. I don't know.
Well, even when we fight, we ball up our fist because it's a better weapon.
Right.
Yeah, well, providing that you're not going to break knuckles.
Well, that's true, but I think if you're not thinking about it, if you're more going along with instinct or just your gut, that's kind of what comes to mind is using that kind of a behavior instead of a thoughtful approach.
Well, that's it. You're like, wow, what the hell is, there's something, and like I said, me and Brenda had talked about this, and that's the one thing she said. She said, expect this to start ramping up. Expect this to happen more frequently.
See, and that's what I thought with this recent situation. If it come out and brazenly did that to the dog in front of the people, what's next?
Well, I talked to, Lori. The hell's Lori's last name? Italian woman from Washington. You know who I'm talking about. Dela Cruz or Dela Vega or something like that. She's big into horses. She had when she was running that one farm, she had 3 of them in the area, and she said that 2 of them weren't too terribly bad. they were a little more skittish of her. The other one, the third one, which she surmised was the leader of the group, absolutely despised her and would come out and glare at her just at the wood's edge. And as a matter of fact, she said that the two meek ones, and she said they almost looked like they were autistic or in awe that she would be on top of a horse or, some of the things she was doing, because one was out actually watching her and was like more interested in what she was doing. And then that, the more aggressive one come up and just looked at him, and he took off to the woods. And then that one she said, I got the feeling that he was looking at me like, your time's coming. I'm going to get you.
Yeah, and we've heard that. And, it's interesting, some of the things we do, I'm sure, mystifies these things. One of the things that we know, at least I was told through my sources, was it totally wigs them out when they see smoke coming out of a person's nose and mouth.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd heard that too. And I'd heard that from a buddy of mine that I was in group with. He said, he said, I was never a smoker, but he said, when we got tasked to go after one, he said, you want to stop one dead in its tracks? Have smoke come out of your mouth, and it stops them cold right in their tracks because they're just looking at you like, holy shit, he breathing smoke.
I used to carry a pipe and pipe tobacco, and I'm not a smoker, never smoked, but I liked the smell of it, and I always wonder if I had been close to one or more of them, and then not seen them because of that.
Well, the other thing is maybe it's not a bad idea to get a vape, and because those things, you ever see people vaping? I mean, it just comes out like a dragon,
I see people down here driving cars, and you can't even see through the back windshield, because they've got the car full of that. I'm thinking, how in the heck do they see where they're going?
I hate to say it, my granddaughter loves her vape. She's in college, and it just comes out, and it's got a pleasant odor to it. So maybe maybe next time I go up in the woods, investing in a vape.
Who knows? But it's that's the one thing that John was telling me, that when they went after that one, he said that was the one time that he actually had considered taking up smoking, was when he watched another operator take a drag off a cigarette, turn around, the thing was coming at him, and smoke started coming out of his nose, and it stopped that thing dead in its tracks. Of course, later on in that whole excursion, they ended up losing one guy. The damn thing, they thought it was pretty much done for. He walked up to it, and the damn thing grabbed him and ripped his arm off.
Oh, geez.
So he said the only thing that killed it was the sheer volume of firepower. It wasn't one particular caliber as much as it was just the volume of firepower that was pumped into this animal.
Now, was that Boggy Creek?
So,
what situation was it?
No, that situation was up in Mount Rainier. They had some instances where my understanding was, because we were all sitting around the fire, and I was with fifth group at the time, and we're all sitting around the fire. Operators tend to we stick to our own, and even when I'd left group and ended up going into Army CID, I still gravitated towards the operators. Once you've chewed on that dirt and you've been in that atmosphere, even though Army CID is still, that's what we call the small Army. Army Special Forces, same way, small Army. Everybody's on a first name basis. I know his rank. that's shithead. You know, that's Joe Blow. That's Ernie Redbeard. Why the hell you call him Ernie Redbeard? Ask him what happened last time him and his wife had sex. I'm like, oh shit, I don't want to know. So, so you know, it's a different atmosphere. And you know, we're sitting around and we're talking about, you know, different things. One of the things that John had brought up, and he said, look, you know, you spend enough time in group, you're at some point going to get tasked where you go after one of these creatures. They're going to send you out to go after one of these things. And he said, let me give you some heads up. And John ended up spending time even in Delta. As a matter of fact, that's when I met John. He was in Delta at the time, and we were in Mogadishu. And then after Mogadishu, he had left Delta because of what Clinton had pulled and come back to group. And, you know, there shortly after is when we had that big roundtable discussion at the campfire, and we're all talking about it. He's like, yeah, this is what happened. And he tells the whole story about, you know, they get pulled into a room. They said, look, we got some problems. It's over on the north face of Mount Rainier. Y'all are going to parachute in. This is not a training mission. This is an actual mission. Y'all are going to be issued live ball. And he said,
how do they keep civilians out in a situation like that?
Come again?
How do they keep civilians out? Like if you're on the north face of Rainier or something like that, how do they block it off so you don't have civilians in the area?
The only thing I can think of is that, you know, they just block the roads. There's possible wildfire or, you know, some bullshit excuse to keep civilians out of the area.
Well, I can tell you from spending a lot of time around Rainier, if you're off the main roads, nobody's out there.
Okay.
And that makes sense to me.
So,
you know, that
there actually are teams or times when groups go out. And I mean, you'd want an Apache or a Black Hawk with FLIR to go and find them, or how do you do these things?
You know, I don't think that there's designated teams that go after these things. I think that they just kind of, you know, not willy-nilly, but they're like, okay, we used that team last time. We need to pick a different team. And that's pretty much how they do it. And it's not just Army Special Forces. I'd heard that Navy SEALs have done it. I've heard that CCTs have done it, Combat Control Technicians, which is Air Force.
Yeah, I was just going to say the Air Force does it.
Now it's MARSOC. It used to be Forced Recon, Marine Corps Forced Recon, which back then, just within the last few years, they got rolled into the Special Forces community. But back then, even though that they weren't listed under Special Forces community, they were treated like Special Forces. So it's not just Army Special Forces that gets called out to do this stuff.
Wow. Now, the question I had was, are they using technology or are they using trackers, human trackers, somebody who knows how to track?
Oh, no. They've, the way I understood it was, you know, John told me that they knew the area where they were having these problems. And he was with Second Group at the time at Fort Rainier. And they basically said, this is the situation, this is where you're going to go. And they used old-fashioned tracking techniques to track these creatures. And it ended up just being one that they killed. And he said they no sooner got the damn thing on the ground and killed it, they called in for an extraction team. And a Black Hawk helicopter comes in, and they sling load the damn thing out of there.
Wow.
And what kept what actually facilitated the whole event was that it was at a sheer cliff face that, for whatever reason, it turned around and decided it was going to fight.
And
instead of trying to run, it tried to fight.
Wow. So they just filled it with lead, or what? I mean,
they lit it up, and then of course El Dumbo walks up there thinking it's dead, and the damn thing reaches up and grabs and pulls his arm right off of it. And that guy ended up dying. He bled to death.
Wow.
That's almost like, I guess on a humor side, have you guys seen the movie The Man Who Killed Hitler and Then the Bigfoot?
Oh, yeah. Actually,
because what happens to him at the end when he thinks the Bigfoot is dead, it isn't, and it gets him, beats the crap out of him.
Well, it's funny. You don't expect Sam Elliott to play such a cheesy damn role.
No, but he was good in it.
He was really good at it. He really was. And for the most part, he was his personified, Gold Seal actor. The only time that he got off onto the cheesy side was, I picked that pair of binoculars, that rifle, and that knife.
Right.
That's all I want.
Listen, fellas, we're running a little short of time, so I know we could go on and on, but and I mentioned to TW that I'm gonna. People have been asking. We did the Google Hangouts, or not Google Hangouts, the Blab chats, but I'm thinking about using Google Hangouts to kind of restart those because they were a lot of fun, and people liked seeing the joking around and stuff we did and the talks. So I know I've already.
Where I get Joe DH to where he couldn't even look at the screen because he.
Those got hilarious when the guy who called himself what was it? No Boots Billy. No Boots Billy. he would just pop onto the screen, and sometimes he wouldn't say anything. He'd be dressed up like in a Bigfoot get up and.
Well, you know who that was, don't you?
Yeah, it was Carl, wasn't it?
It was Carl Platt.
Right.
And Carl had this thing about mountain monsters. And no shoes.
No shoes.
No shoes curling.
No shoes. Oh, that cracked me up, too. I couldn't believe it when I heard that. Who wore paper bag pants.
Yeah, and of course, that's how No Boots Billy come about. And as a matter of fact, I was talking to Carl the other day. He just got remarried. God love him.
Oh, good for him.
I wish him and his new wife all the best the world has to offer. Carl's really a good soul. And I've known Carl for years. When my folks got divorced and my mother moved back to Michigan, that was one of the first guys I'd met when I visit my mother. And Carl's dad was a local cop. Ted Platts was probably as decent a guy as you'd ask for. Very down to earth. Wasn't one of these cops that had a chip on his shoulder. And I really kind of learned a lot from him growing up, when I'd go visit my mother, because that was the one thing that he'd always, I'd always showed an interest in being in law enforcement anyways, but he's like, there's a fine line from being an effective cop and being an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you get further around just not being an asshole.
Well, let's hope we can get Carl to come back on when we do the chats and bring his humor back. That was a lot of fun to have him on there.
God, get that, and Jeremiah and his pink earbuds. So.
Well, we'll be going down that road again. So, folks, that's something to look forward to. We'll be doing that here in the near future. fellas.
Yeah, get prepared. Buckle up, because we're about to have another rodeo.
Well, fellas, listen, appreciate the chat. Keep us updated if there's anything new that happens down in that situation there.
I will.
And you fellas...
Well, the funny thing is, and before we kind of sign off, the funny thing is, Tim Baker, Kumbo, had told me when he was stationed at White Sands Missile Range and was working on the Nike missile systems, that was one of the areas that they had researched a lot, was that same area over by the petroglyphs.
Yeah,
not far from John's ranch.
We had a contractor on a while back doing some work in that area who had some encounters in there.
And with Tim, you had to kind of take what he said with a grain of salt. Not that he's not prone to fabrication, but he was, some of the things he talked about, that's a little far-fetched.
Mm-hmm.
And then come to find out, well, shit, fucking right, man. He's been around a while.
Alrighty, fellas,
he's not
listen.
off dot.
We gotta cut it off here. We're just about out of time. Fellas, thanks again. We'll do it again here real soon. Stay tuned, folks, for the third segment, Jim Sower's Readings.
TW, thanks. Good meeting you, TW.
Good meeting you too, bud.
Welcome. This is a collection of 5 stories being brought to you by William Jevning and being narrated by me, Jim Sower. Story number 1, Can Bigfoot Be Killed? Number 2, Pueblo County Sighting. Number 3, Delta County, Paonia, Colorado. And number 4, Bonner County, Idaho. Number 5, Glimpsing the Bushman. Story number 1, Can Bigfoot Be Killed? By John Steele. There are dozens of reports that suggest perhaps Bigfoot cannot be killed, or at least not brought down by initial shots fired. In 1957, at Winoga Butte, Washington, Gary Jonas and Jim Newell were hunting and had just shot a deer. Before they could get to it, a 9-foot-tall, hairy creature walked into the clearing, picked up the deer, and carried it off under its arm. Jonas, annoyed by losing his deer, fired several shots with his .30-06 into the creature's back, but the creature never stopped walking. However, it did emit a strange whistling scream, a cry of pain. In October 1959, west of Roseburg, Oregon, 2 boys, one 12, the other 17, saw a Bigfoot near an abandoned sawmill. They went back with guns to look for it. It showed up, but began chasing them with its arms outstretched. Strangely enough, it never caught up with them, although it easily could have. The 17-year-old, reputedly a good shot, was able to get off several good shots with his .30-06, but the creature kept coming. However, it did fall forward onto its knuckles a couple of times. They wondered later if it was herding them to get them away from its territory or its family or possessions. In 1965, near Falk, Arkansas, a 14-year-old named James Crabtree was squirrel hunting when he heard some horses galloping into a nearby lake. Then he heard a dog howling in pain. Investigating, he came up behind an 8-foot-tall creature covered all over with 4-inch-long reddish-brown hair. It turned, and he couldn't see anything of its face other than a wide, flat nose. Everything else was covered in hair. The Bigfoot started walking towards Crabtree, who, terrified, shot it in the face 3 times with his shotgun. As the creature didn't seem to notice, the boy left as fast as he could. In Washington, during the summer of 1966, there were numerous sightings of a white, gray Bigfoot, 8 feet tall, with red eyes, weighing at least 600 pounds and walking like a human. A group of men often went looking for it, and usually found it in a gravel pit. Roger True fired at it from a range of only 20 feet, and hit it at least 3 times from his .270 rifle, but didn't knock it down. Tommy Thompson fired his 10-gauge shotgun from 10 yards. He said it screamed a sort of high-pitched squeal, but the shots didn't stop it running away. In May 1967, in the Dalles, Oregon, several teenage boys spend their nights hunting Bigfoot. One night, they were moving through the woods when they came to a tree where the branches hung to the ground. Pushing past them, they found a creature 8 to 10 feet away that was 7 feet tall, crouched down. Dave Churchill blasted it twice in the chest with his 12-gauge shotgun, which knocked it down. It rolled over twice and then ran off. It broke through a fence, snapping 3 posts off at the ground. The boys returned the next day to claim their prize, but the footprints were lost after 80 to 100 yards, and there was no blood to follow. That is the end of story number 1. Story number 2. Pueblo County sighting, Colorado, summer 2005. Pueblo County, Colorado, July 11, 2005. Outdoorsman hunter Peter Ray Williams reported that he was traveling northbound on Colorado 96 past Wetmore en route to Florence when he blew a right rear tire on his truck. He stopped to change the tire, just a few yards short of the right or east turn to CR 389. It was about 7:50 p.m. in the evening. Williams stated that he was putting on the spare and dumping the blown tire into the bed of the truck when something caught his attention up the road to his right. I looked up and was shocked to see 2 Bigfoot-looking creatures cross the road from east to west in about 3 or 4 steps and disappear into an open field in setting sun shadows on the other side. He swears he heard them talking in a frantic kind of nattering. I looked up because I thought what I was hearing was men arguing. Just that quick, they were walking across the road. I heard these sounds, maybe talking angrily. Then they were gone. Williams figures they were either fleeing the fire line off to the north-northeast or were confused or displaced. He finished the tire job and drove over to the side of the road where the 2 left the road, but he could find nothing. Williams said they were black, both of them, one taller than the other, and the bigger one wasn't looking where it was going, but looking at the other Bigfoot with arms straight down at his sides, and the other one was gesturing, not wildly, just gesturing with his hands about something. Maybe, he said, they were arguing, but they carried on just like people do on their way to somewheres. It was really wild seeing my first Bigfoot sighting. I don't know if it was male or female. As fast as my eyes adjusted to the scene, they were gone. Man, they move, but they weren't running. We saw a couple of deer cross Road 96 earlier. There was a wildfire burning off in the distance, somewhere towards the east. William's stepdaughter, Leslie Ann Cole Marshall, formerly of Cokedale near Trinidad, was also a witness to the event. She was inside the cab of the truck caring for a baby. In a telephone interview, Mrs. Marshall said she thought they both were better than 8 feet in height and thought they must be males. She didn't hear any sounds from them. She wasn't outside the truck, but she did hear Pete yelling at her to look at the big feet crossing the road. I already saw them by the time Pete started yelling at me, she said. I saw them coming, but thought I was seeing things. Yeah, this is like not a real happening. Who would believe this? They were both big males, I mean like 2 big dudes. Mrs. Marshall thought they crossed the road in about 2 steps. Something like this, unexpected, left me speechless. We sat there in the truck for a while and just stared off into space. I don't know about Pete, but I don't know how to process these things. It happened so fast. It's kind of surreal and like what was that? This is the end of reading number 2. Story number 3. Delta County, Paonia, Colorado. Ragged Mountains. Roughly 1977, about 28 years ago, my brothers Ollie Westland, Jay Rigdon, and a friend, Danny Daigle, were elk hunting in the Ragged Mountains above Paonia, Colorado, in the area of McClure Pass. Paonia State Park is to the northeast of the Great Gunnison, with the Grand Mesa National Forest setting off to the northwest. The region boasts great fishing and huge elk herds. We were hunting in a very rugged and tough terrain, and were talking and joking about how quiet and eerie it seemed in this particular area because it wasn't an area where we usually hunted. It was quite different because we didn't hear all the chipmunks, camp robbers, squirrels, etc., like we did in other parts of the McClure Pass area. There were few hunters in the area, too, because it was so difficult to get into. After sitting and watching a meadow in the area for a while, we decided to split up and go out and see if we could run into something. Jay went one way, Danny another, and Ollie and I yet another. Now, before I go any further, I must tell you what we found when we first arrived in the area. There was a cold campsite where someone had been camped, and they had horses with them. The evidence was everywhere, including a bale of hay that we saw a good 30 feet up in a spruce tree, where it looked like it had been thrown by the way the bale was broken, and the baling twine was hanging in the branches amid the hay. We thought this strange, but didn't get too excited about it at the time. Then along the trail leading into the meadow where we had sat, approximately 3/4 of a mile from the hay in the tree, we found a large mule deer, a pretty big buck, dead beside the trail. Not at all strange in itself, however, but this deer hadn't been shot, nor had it been killed by a bear, because there were neither any bullet wounds or claw or teeth marks anywhere on the carcass. But this deer had its head torn off, and its limbs were also torn off, and it was scattered around an area of about 40 to 50 feet in diameter. Strange though it was, we still weren't concerned or worried about anything. We were there to get an elk, and that was foremost on all of our minds. After splitting up, I'd say maybe an hour, my brother Ollie and I heard a couple of shots ring out up the mountain from our position, and we immediately recognized the sound of the shots as being from Danny's rifle, a .30-06 in which Danny was shooting what he called speeders, a .22 caliber sized bullet with a plastic casing around it to make it seat into the riflings of the barrel until the bullet clears the muzzle, and then the plastic breaks away, leaving the little bullet to go on its way extremely fast, but makes the rifle have a kind of muffled report like a .22 Magnum. So we headed in the direction of the shots, agreeing it was Danny, because if he had one down, he'd need to get it taken care of quickly, as it was almost dusk. Along the way, we saw some tracks going across a sloped meadow and up a steep hill on the other side of the meadow, and I said to my brother, "That must be Danny's tracks there. Let's head up that way and follow them to Danny." When we got to the tracks, we were both dumbfounded. Neither of us spoke for a few seconds. I guess because neither one of us could believe what we were looking at. These tracks were approximately 18 inches long and 8 to 10 inches wide at the ball of the foot. I tried to step alongside of the tracks at the same stride and couldn't even come close. We thought it might be a hoax, but when we got to where they went up the steep hill that I mentioned before, there would have been no way a man with a pair of big feet strapped to his feet could have traversed this slope, and these tracks went straight up the mountain. Well, we finally found Danny, and he did have a spike down, and while helping him dress out the elk, I brought up the tracks that Ollie and I had seen earlier, and Danny looked at us as if we had seen a ghost and said, "Oh my God, I saw the same tracks in a muddy creek down by the hill a little ways away." We were all a bit shaken by this discovery, especially after you factor in the deer and the hay and the rugged terrain, etc. We said that one day we were going back and we're going to try and find more evidence, or better yet, maybe get some physical evidence or even a picture of the creature. At least some plaster casts of some of the footprints. I am truly convinced that there are Bigfoot in this area. My brothers and Danny and I are planning a trip back into the area early September 2006. Dale Westland, Salt Lake City, Utah, October 31st, 2005. That is the end of story number 3. Story number 4, Bonner County, Idaho, 1970s. My brother Jeff and I grew up in the wilds of northern Idaho, shot grouse, saw elk, moose, bear, rode our horses for miles and miles in the early 70s. We used to ride our horses up to Cindy and Wendy's place, up the creek that flowed into Rapid Lightning Creek, just about 11 miles up. One day, our horse, we were riding double, spooked and threw us off and ran back the way we had come from. We chased after the horse for a little bit, then turned around to hike back home. We came around a bend in the creek, and a big, upright, black animal was scooping up water in a creek, having a drink. We were about 30 yards from it, and we were so astonished we held our breath. It was black, graceful, two-legged, and huge. We grew up in the wilds, and to this day I still see this animal in my mind. It was not a bear, and not anything I had seen before. We never saw its eyes, just the upright form and profile. No, it was not a bear. This creature was at home on 2 legs. The place we saw it was so rugged, there were boulders, slippery rocks, and was where he was dipping a drink of water. When it caught a whiff of our scent and heard me gasp, it strolled off. I really mean strode off. It didn't drop down on all fours and run. It glanced at us and walked across the stream into the woods. I've had many animal encounters, but only 2 have stayed with me. This creature was the newest, and about 4 years ago, when a maroon black cat, the height of my bumper of my expedition, ran in front of me, 10 feet in front, and the light hit it, and some kind of rosettes lit up, not really spotted, but splashed, with a pattern deep red, shading to black, blocky head, heavy set, long tail. I called the TXPW. They said I saw a cat. Yeah, a house cat 3.5 feet tall. They thought I was drinking, but about 11 a.m. coming back from babysitting? I think not. That is the end of story number 4. Story number 5. Story number 5. Glimpsing the Bushman. Ray Lakes, north of Great Slave Lake, and Yellowknife in Canada's Northwest Territories. Story by John Bernard Bourne. When I came north, I chuckled at tall tales of tall, hairy creatures, until I saw something. I moved to Ray Lakes, this small, isolated community in the Northwest Territories, almost 3 years ago as a teacher. In the parlance of local population, I was a white man from Ontario coming to live among the Aboriginals. In this case, it was a group of Aboriginals I had never heard of before, the Dog Ribs. At the time, I looked at myself as an anthropologist going to observe a unique and isolated culture. When I arrived, I was inundated by cultural orientation. I listened to the stories of the elders and observed local customs. In those early days, the story that stuck out most for me was the one about the Bushman. According to the Dog Rib people, the Bushman is a tall, hairy creature who lurks in the bush, ready to abduct anyone traveling alone. Those who have been taken are usually never seen again. and if they are found mute and mentally deranged. To an outsider, this story sounded a lot like a cross between BC's Sasquatch and Eastern Canada's Wendigo. But for the dog ribs, it is something to be taken very seriously. The Bushman story aside, I tried to leap into life in this Aboriginal community by embracing all of its rituals. I joined the caribou hunt. I attended the community feasts, and I went every time there was a drum dance. Participating in the rituals was easy enough, and I took them in as one would take in the symbols of any unique tradition. Although I felt detached and out of place most of the time, I still found it interesting. The difficult part was adjusting to the challenges of everyday life. Many of the people in my village can only speak their native language, so the linguistic hurdle is the first you have to overcome. Issues of illiteracy and substance abuse could also be an obstacle. There were many times when I would forget that I was still in Canada. I lived in South Korea for a couple of years, and I found there was less cultural shock living in that faraway Asian nation than in the far north of the country I called home. And then there is the long darkness. The lack of sunlight creeps up on you at the end of October and stays until March. Although the phenomenon was fascinating, getting up and going to work in the dark proved very difficult at first. I soon began counting down the days until spring and the endless daylight that it brings. It was when the daylight was beginning to reappear that I saw the Bushman. It was the middle of March, and I was driving with my wife and a friend on the winter road, the ice route that is open about 6 weeks every year to bring in food and supplies. We were caught in a blizzard, and our visibility had deteriorated to nothing. We were stuck on the frozen endless white of Faber Lake, halfway between Gameti and Reyedzo, which means in the middle of nowhere. It was just a flash. In fact, I would have thought it was an illusion brought on by the snow, but the two other people with me saw it as well. It was tall and hairy, running on its 2 hind legs. The hair was long and hung from its body in an unkempt and wild manner. It was gone before we could say anything. My friend who was driving shouted, "What was that?" But we all knew. We tried to push our original instinct away and rationalize it was something else, but we couldn't. When I told my friends and family in Ontario about the experience, they thought I was making it up. Or worse, they tried to logically explain it. It was probably a bear coming out of hibernation. It was only the dog rib people who did not treat the story with any type of condescension. They nodded solemnly and understood it for what it was. Shortly after, things began to make more sense to me in the community. The drum dance, which I initially perceived as being primitive and unsophisticated, became full of new meaning. I learned to drum. The hunt, which I had always thought was a little atavistic and barbaric, seemed almost spiritual. I became familiar with the various uses of the caribou, including the consumption of the unborn fetus by the elders, because it is soft and easy to chew when you have no teeth. This past fall, a story began circulating around our village. The wise ones were giving everybody fair warning. They had a premonition that the Bushman would be abducting somebody this year. We were warned to be careful and not to go walking by ourselves into the bush. I was surprised by how I reacted. 3 years ago, I would have made fun of it. Now, I just accepted the warning and kept it at the back of my mind. Logically, I know there is no Bushman. It makes no sense and defies any type of scientific evidence. I know it is symbolic of other things like loneliness and darkness one feels when living in isolation in the far north. It is a parable to understand a unique and distinct culture in the world. But I did see something on that winter road. Winter is here again, and the long darkness gives you time to think. Tales of the Bushman do not really pervade your thoughts during the time of daylight, but now they almost seem plausible. Every night when I put my baby daughter to bed, I lie beside her, singing songs and telling stories. Once she'd sleep, I used to creep quietly out of the room. Lately, however, I find myself staying longer, well after she has fallen into a deep slumber. I feel this subconscious urge to watch over her and protect her from the Bushman, just in case. Published on Maclean's Online Canada, 3rd of March, 2003. This is the end of the 5 stories. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning, @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open.